Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. I never thought I would find myself in a situation like this. When I first got married, I imagined a quiet life with my husband, built on love, trust, and the promise of stability. But life has a way of putting people into complicated positions, ones you could never prepare for. What happened to me was something I never imagined, and yet it became my reality. It all started the night I agreed to share a bed with my husband's son. Now, before you judge me, I want you to hear the whole story. I was in my early 30s when I married a man who was older than me. He was loving, supportive, and everything I thought I needed at the time. But he came with a family, and with that family came his son, a young man in his 20s, quiet at first, but with an energy that slowly drew me in. He wasn't a child. He was already an adult, independent, and with his own life experiences. And yet, there was something in the way he looked at me that unsettled me in ways I couldn't ignore. The first time I really noticed him was at the dinner table. He laughed at something I said, and for a moment, it felt like he was the only one listening. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing more than harmless attention. But then little things started to build up. The way he would stand just a little too close in the kitchen. The way his eyes lingered when I thought no one else was watching. It was subtle, but it was enough to make me question what was happening between us. That night, circumstances pushed us into the same room. My husband had left unexpectedly for work, and I was alone in a big, cold house that suddenly felt too quiet. His son offered to keep me company, just to make sure I wasn't lonely. At first, it seemed innocent enough, two adults sitting in the living room, talking about everything and nothing. But as the night grew later, exhaustion set in, and that was when he suggested something I never thought I would agree to. "You don't have to sleep alone tonight," he said, almost too casually. Against my better judgment, against everything I believed about loyalty and marriage, I agreed. Lying in that bed, I could hear my heart pounding. I kept telling myself to keep my distance, to make this nothing more than a temporary arrangement. But the truth was, there was already tension between us. It wasn't just about sharing space, it was about the unspoken feelings neither of us dared to admit. The silence of the room, the closeness of our bodies, the heat of that moment, it all became too much. And that was when everything changed. That night stayed in my mind longer than I expected. I remember lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I let myself agree to something so unusual. It wasn't just the act of sharing a bed, it was the weight of the emotions that came with it. My husband's son was just a few inches away, his breathing steady, his presence undeniable. I kept my body stiff, trying to convince myself this was nothing more than a harmless arrangement. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. The days after were filled with silence between us, but it was the kind of silence that carried meaning. Every time I saw him in the hallway, I felt my chest tighten. Every word he spoke carried an unspoken layer, like there was something beneath the surface neither of us could say out loud. It wasn't love, at least not in the traditional sense. It was something far more complicated. It was curiosity, desire, and a kind of forbidden connection that made it nearly impossible to look away. My husband, completely unaware, carried on with his usual routine. He trusted me, and that trust only made the situation heavier on my heart. I didn't want to hurt him, and yet I couldn't deny what was happening inside me. There was no denying the quiet thrill I felt when his son brushed past me in the kitchen, his hand accidentally grazing mine, or the way his eyes would linger just a second longer than necessary. These small moments became the fuel for a storm I didn't know how to control. One evening, I found myself alone in the living room, scrolling mindlessly on my phone, trying to distract myself from the thoughts that haunted me. He walked in casually, holding a glass of water, and sat across from me. The air felt heavy as soon as he entered, like the walls themselves knew we were carrying a secret. "About that night," he started, his voice low, almost hesitant. My breath caught in my throat. He didn't finish his sentence, but he didn't need to. We both knew what he was talking about. I quickly changed the subject, pretending it was nothing, but the truth was I was scared. Not scared of him, but scared of myself, of what I might allow to happen if I stopped pretending I didn't feel it too. The mystery of it all kept me restless at night. Was he feeling the same pull I was, or was I just imagining everything? Every glance, every pause in conversation, every unfinished sentence, it all left me in a state of constant suspense. As time went on, the line between what was acceptable and what was not began to blur. Sharing that bed once had already opened a door I wasn't sure I could close. The conflict inside me grew with every passing day. I loved my husband, yet there was something undeniably magnetic about the attention I was receiving from his son. It was the kind of attention that made me feel seen, alive, and desired in ways I hadn't experienced in a long time. Sometimes I wondered if fate had placed me in this situation to test me. Was this a lesson in loyalty, or was it a chance encounter meant to awaken something in me that I had buried for years? The questions had no clear answers, but they played in my mind on repeat. Late at night, when the house was quiet and I couldn't sleep, I would replay every moment. His laughter at dinner, his steady presence beside me that night, his unspoken words in the living room. Each memory felt like a puzzle piece, hinting at something bigger waiting to unfold. But what exactly was it leading to? The suspense between us only deepened, and I could sense that it was only a matter of time before one of us crossed a line we couldn't go back from. The tension between us didn't go away, it only grew stronger with each passing day. What started as one unexpected night of sharing a bed had turned into something we carried silently, like a secret only we could feel. I tried to distract myself by focusing on the routines of married life, cooking, cleaning, making plans with my husband, but even in those moments, the thought of his son lingered in the back of my mind. It was like a shadow that refused to leave, no matter how much I tried to convince myself it didn't exist. The conflict wasn't just about desire, it was about the guilt that came with it. Every time my husband smiled at me, my heart twisted. He trusted me completely, and I carried that trust like a burden. And yet, when I found myself alone with his son, I felt my defenses weaken. He had this way of looking at me, not demanding, not obvious, but almost questioning, as if he was silently asking if I felt the same. That unspoken question was always there, hanging between us. One evening, while my husband was out late, I stayed in the kitchen longer than usual. His son walked in, carrying his phone, and leaned against the counter. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The quiet stretched out, filled with an electricity I couldn't explain. Then he asked, almost carefully, "Do you ever think about that night?" My chest tightened, and I looked away, pretending I didn't hear him clearly. But I had heard every word. I didn't answer, and he didn't push further, but the silence that followed was louder than anything he could have said. As the days passed, I started noticing the little ways our dynamic was changing. At family dinners, I avoided his eyes, afraid someone else might notice the tension. When we were alone, I caught myself speaking softer or listening longer than necessary. I knew I was walking on dangerous ground, but there was something about the mystery of it all that made it harder to resist. It wasn't just physical attraction, it was the pull of something forbidden, something I couldn't quite name but also couldn't escape. A subplot began forming quietly in the background. My friends had started asking me if I was happy, if everything was going well in my marriage. They didn't know what was going on, of course, but their innocent questions made me more aware of the storm brewing inside me. I kept wondering, was I searching for something my marriage wasn't giving me, or was this just temptation disguised as fate? Meanwhile, his son wasn't making things easier. He had moments of distance, almost as if he was trying to control himself, but then he would slip, like brushing against me while reaching for a glass, or letting his hand rest on mine just a second longer than needed. Those brief touches were small, but they sent waves through me that I couldn't ignore. The real conflict was no longer just between me and him, it was inside me. My heart felt torn in two directions. I wanted to be loyal, to keep my vows, but there was another part of me that was restless, curious, and dangerously close to giving in. Every decision I made felt like it carried consequences I wasn't ready to face. The nights started to feel heavier, almost suffocating with the weight of everything unsaid. I would lie awake beside my husband, pretending to sleep, while my mind wandered back to that night and the countless glances that followed. It wasn't just a memory anymore, it was a storm building inside me, growing louder with every small interaction. The suspense of not knowing what might happen next made even the simplest moments feel charged, like every word, every touch of air between us carried a hidden meaning. One evening, the house was quieter than usual. My husband had taken a late shift, leaving me alone once again. I tried to distract myself with chores, but when his son walked into the living room, everything shifted. He sat down across from me, his expression unreadable, his presence impossible to ignore. The silence stretched on until he finally spoke, his voice low and deliberate. "We can't keep pretending this doesn't exist," he said. My heart skipped, my breath catching as if he had just voiced the very thing I had been running from. I tried to laugh it off, to steer the moment away, but his eyes held me in place. They were steady, almost searching, as if he was waiting for me to admit what we both knew. The room felt smaller, the air tighter, and every second I didn't answer only made the tension stronger. I could feel my pulse racing, torn between the loyalty I owed my husband and the undeniable pull toward the man sitting in front of me. The days that followed blurred together, each one more difficult than the last. Even at dinner with my husband sitting right between us, the tension was there. It was in the way his son's hand brushed against mine when passing a plate, in the way his gaze lingered just a little too long before he looked away. I wondered if my husband noticed the undercurrent at all, or if he trusted me so completely that he couldn't imagine something like this was even possible. That thought alone made the guilt press harder on my chest. The breaking point came late one night. The house was dark, the silence heavy, and I heard a soft knock at my door. My heart pounded as I froze, knowing exactly who it was without even asking. The choice before me felt impossible: open the door and step into something I couldn't take back, or stay behind it and carry the weight of what-ifs forever. My hand hovered, trembling, torn between two paths that could destroy everything or change it forever. This was the moment where everything I had been avoiding came crashing down, where every unspoken word and stolen glance demanded an answer. And yet, the question remained, what would I do? My hand lingered on the doorknob, frozen between fear and temptation. The quiet of the house felt deafening, broken only by the faint creak of the floorboards outside my room. He didn't knock again, but I knew he was still there, waiting. I could almost feel the weight of his presence pressing through the door. My chest rose and fell with uneven breaths as I thought about what might happen if I opened it. And then, just as suddenly as he had come, I heard the sound of footsteps retreating down the hallway. The moment slipped away, but the tension it left behind was unbearable. The next morning, I expected things to feel awkward, maybe even unbearable, but instead, it was the opposite. He acted as if nothing had happened, chatting casually with me over breakfast while my husband sat at the table, sipping his coffee. That calmness only made it worse. It was like he had decided to play a dangerous game, testing me with silence, pushing me to wonder if I was the only one haunted by what almost happened. Days passed, and I thought maybe the storm would fade, that time would dull the tension between us. But just when I convinced myself things were settling, a new twist shattered the illusion. My husband came home one evening with unexpected news. His work schedule had changed. He would be traveling more often, sometimes gone for nights at a time. He said it with a smile, relieved that the extra hours meant more income for the household. I forced myself to smile back, but inside, my heart sank. The one person who unknowingly kept a fragile wall between me and his son was about to be absent even more. This changed everything. The quiet nights, the accidental closeness, the secret glances, all of it was about to grow more dangerous with him gone. And I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to resist. The very first evening he was away, the house felt different, heavier. His son lingered around longer than usual, sitting on the couch while I tried to read a book. I could feel his eyes on me, and though he didn't say a word, the silence between us spoke louder than anything. I put the book down, pretending to be tired, and went upstairs earlier than usual. But even as I closed the door, I knew he was still awake, waiting, just like that night before. The stakes were higher now, not just because of the absence of my husband, but because of the danger of being caught. What if someone else noticed? What if whispers started among family or friends? It wasn't just a secret anymore, it was a secret that had the power to destroy everything I had built. The suspense of waiting for something to happen became a torment I carried everywhere. And just when I thought the tension couldn't grow any sharper, another surprise came. My husband mentioned, almost casually, that his son had confided in him recently. "He's been distracted," my husband said. "He told me he's dealing with feelings he can't really explain." I nearly dropped the glass I was holding, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. What if he knew? What if his son had said too much? This second twist sent my mind spiraling. It wasn't just about the two of us anymore, it was about the risk of exposure, the possibility that our secret tension was already unraveling. The suspense was no longer private, it was a threat hovering over every interaction, every word, every glance. The night that changed everything came quietly, without warning. My husband had left for another overnight trip, and I was sitting alone in the living room, pretending to watch television. The silence of the house pressed in on me, and my thoughts drifted again to the secret I had been carrying for weeks. When his son walked in, the air shifted instantly. He didn't sit across the room like before. He sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. My pulse quickened, and I knew this was the moment I had been avoiding. He didn't speak right away, and neither did I. The quiet stretched between us, filled with everything we had left unsaid. Finally, he whispered, "I can't keep pretending anymore." His voice was steady but low, like he had been holding it in for far too long. I turned toward him, and the look in his eyes told me everything. He wanted me to choose, to decide once and for all if we were going to cross the line or let it go. My chest tightened as I thought of my husband, of the trust he placed in me, and of the secret that had been threatening to destroy us all. I had been torn in two for so long, but in that moment, the weight of the truth hit me harder than ever. If I gave in, it wouldn't just be a mistake, it would be the kind of betrayal that could never be undone. My voice shook as I finally said, "We can't do this." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For a long moment, he just stared at me, his jaw tight, his eyes full of something I couldn't name, anger, longing, heartbreak. Then he nodded slowly, standing up without another word. I watched him walk away, my heart breaking even though I knew I had chosen the only path that wouldn't destroy everything. I thought the conflict had ended there, that the secret would fade into silence. But the twist came the next morning when my husband returned. Over breakfast, he looked at both of us carefully, almost too carefully, and then smiled faintly. "You know," he said, his tone calm but deliberate, "sometimes people don't realize how obvious their feelings are." My stomach dropped, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Had he known all along? The room went silent, his son avoiding my eyes, me frozen in place. My husband didn't press further, but the weight of his words hung over us like a storm cloud. Maybe he suspected, maybe he didn't, but the uncertainty was its own punishment. And that was the real climax. Not passion, not confession, but the terrifying knowledge that some secrets never truly stay hidden. The silence that followed my husband's words lingered long after breakfast ended. His calm smile stayed with me, almost haunting, because it left everything uncertain. Did he really know? Was it just suspicion? Or was it his way of reminding me that trust, once shaken, is fragile and easily broken? I carried those questions with me in the days that followed, and they became the final test of my heart. I avoided his son as much as I could. The tension that had once pulled us closer now turned into distance. He stopped lingering in the kitchen, stopped brushing past me in quiet hallways. It was as if we both silently agreed that what almost happened could never happen again. There was no need to speak of it. Sometimes endings come not with dramatic goodbyes, but with unspoken choices. As for my husband, I found myself looking at him differently. His patience, his trust, even the way he didn't press for answers, it forced me to reflect on the meaning of loyalty. Love isn't always about the rush of temptation or the thrill of what's forbidden. Sometimes, love is about staying when leaving feels easier and choosing the harder road because it's the right one. That realization brought me closer to him than I had been in months. I began to invest more in our marriage, not because I felt guilty, but because I finally understood what was truly at risk. In the end, the story didn't explode into scandal or heartbreak. It settled quietly, like a fire smothered before it could consume the house. Yet the lessons it left behind were powerful. I learned that desire can be dangerous, that secrets can destroy, and that loyalty isn't tested when things are easy. It's tested when temptation is staring you in the face. The final twist, though, will always stay with me. My husband never mentioned that morning again, and I never asked if he suspected more than he admitted. Maybe he knew. Maybe he didn't. But perhaps the real mercy was that he allowed silence to be the answer. So, as I close this chapter, I leave you with a question. What would you have done in my place? Would you have confessed everything, or would you have chosen silence too? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And if you'd like to see a sequel, exploring what might happen if the past refuses to stay buried, let me know as well. Summary: this is the story of a woman caught in an unexpected emotional storm when she agreed to share a bed with her husband's son. What began as a moment of comfort turned into a suspenseful test of loyalty, desire, and trust. Faced with temptation and the risk of betrayal, she had to choose between giving in or protecting the foundation of her marriage. The climax reveals hidden truths, unanswered questions, and the powerful lesson that some secrets are best left unspoken. E9.